we'll just get going. I have a presentation that I'll just go through, but since just you and I, stop me with any questions. But really, what I wanted to talk about is the financial side and the budgeting and how to financially prepare for this grant and running a program.
Okay.
So I'll share my screen and we'll go through a little presentation, and then I have a budget planning pro forma document. Um, so here we go. And feel free, just stop me whenever you have a question and we can
Okay.
chat. But I think that this, you probably know this, but we were given from the legislators $450,000 a year for 5 years to grant out to institutions of higher ed to create inclusive higher ed. Our range of awards is anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000, and we'll get really into the details about how to get to those numbers, and that's across the 5-year term. Average awards are about 400,000. For the total legislation, we are going to be giving 3 to 5 schools the opportunity to start up. We've already awarded 2 last grant cycle, so we've got, 2 to 3 more to go. This grant cycle, as you know, is really for our rural partners, our Western Slope, and our community colleges to kind of make sure that we are creating some equity around geographic access and reaching all of Colorado and all of our communities, including those who might be a little more underserved than our Denver metro area. The first year of the funding is program planning, and then the rest is kind of the program development. And we'll get into that in much more detail as we go. But it's important to know that startups vary by institution. So even though I'm going to give you an example, it really varies by what the institution is doing, what their costs are, what their staffing plans are. So it varies. We are providing a budget template. It's on our website along with the application materials. It's a real easy plug and play. So we would love the budget to be provided in that way. And then there's an optional place to do any sort of budget narrative as needed to explain. So this is sort of just an example of what it might look like in the past. These are some of the models that we've worked with. But really for the community college, since that's where you are coming from, that's where I'll focus today. But there's that year 1 planning, and then year 2 and 3 are really, and 4 are kind of the bulk of the awards. And then we taper down as the programs are in place and students are there, and we can increase the students. So funding tapers down, students increase. And after year 5, there should be enough to be self-sustaining. So I wanted to quickly go through some of the unique costs and revenues that are associated with an inclusive higher ed. So this chart on the left kind of shows what are the costs. So the first row is your typical higher education. So there's instruction, textbooks, support services, facilities, all the things that you all pay to run higher education programs. Same on the revenue side. These are the typical ways that our colleges are getting their revenue, right? From tuition, program fees, technology fees, whatever, all of the revenue sources that are coming in into the typical programs. We've also included the student payment sources, and this isn't necessarily part of the grant application, but just to kind of show the difference and have people be thinking about how are students going to pay for college. So typically parents, savings accounts, scholarships, student loans, federal financial aid, those are all kind of the typical paths. There are some components on top of those that are unique to the inclusive higher ed program. So I'll start with the costs. We are really providing a specialized support system, right? So we're providing staff to support students with their job development, their academic coordination, independent living where that's appropriate, typically on a university. So that may not be your case, but if they are living in the dorms, we're providing further independent support. We're also creating some specialized courses for these students that really focus on their independent living, career readiness, those kinds of things. And so those on top of the typical higher education costs kind of round out all the costs associated with the program. So what's most important is that we are creating a sustainable program. And so we really want to make sure that our schools that we partner with understand how to do that cost recovery and what are the revenue sources. So unique to inclusive higher ed, typically our schools charge students a specific program fee for the supports they receive in the inclusive higher ed program. And that number varies depending on, it's anywhere, I've seen it for $3,000 a year. Some of our universities charge $8,000 or $9,000 a year for that program fee. We also heavily partner with our community and state organizations and our CCBs and our voc rehab partners. We, as a state, have worked hard to create a specific line item within vocational rehabilitation that allows our schools to receive funding directly from DVR to provide vocational supports. It's $3,000 per semester per student who's enrolled with the vocational rehabilitation services. So that's a nice added revenue to support mainly the vocational and academic supports that our schools are providing. Then we have this grant program. And then some of our schools in those specialized courses that they've created have funneled the tuition from that course directly into the inclusive higher ed program. Whereas the standard tuition will go to the university or college as a whole, some of our schools have made sure that that specialized course tuition comes into their program to help fund the services that they're providing. As far as student payments, again, typical, our students do all of the typical payments with parents and savings accounts and those kinds of things. But unique to our students is many of them can get additional supports from voc rehab and from their CCBs for things like tuition and books and living expenses. There are a ton of scholarships nationwide, as well as in Colorado. We've really worked hard to develop specific scholarships for students in these programs. And then once the school obtains its CTP approval, which is Certified Transition Program, students are eligible for federal financial aid. All of it, so Pell, work study, the only thing they're not eligible for is student loans. So that's kind of an overview of the cost and revenue side and kind of what unique things to look out for when we're developing an inclusive higher ed program. So one of the biggest questions is to ask that what is the main driver of sustainability is how many students do you need to serve to cover the costs and reach sustainability versus how many students do you have the capacity to serve? And we'll look in detail at the budget template that kind of lets you play with those numbers. But really, we want to be able to provide good services, good programming to these students with enough supports, but also ensure that we have enough students to cover the cost to make the program sustainable on its own without this grant funding. So a little bit more, I think I kind of went into this, but a little deeper into those cost recoveries that are available for inclusive higher ed. We always encourage our programs to utilize existing services and supports that are there. So see how you can tap in so you're not paying additionally for instructional resources or residential supports or advising or any of those sorts of efforts that go on. So rather than creating a separate program, we encourage people to merge in with the systems that already exist so there's not added cost. Developing that program fee. I have yet to see a program be able to do this without a program fee, and I think it's okay. I think that students and families expect that they're receiving additional supports, and so yes, there's a fee associated with that. So really looking at what is that program fee that will cover the costs of providing these extra supports, and what does that look like? I've talked about the general tuition directing into the program from the specialized course that's created rather than it going into the larger institution bucket. One of the areas that we really rely on a lot for supports is peer mentorship. So we have hired peers to support students academically, socially, independent living wise. And one of the keys for cost there is to really look at how can we utilize work study to cover the costs for those peer mentors who provide that work. I talked about DVR. It's really important that our students get connected with DVR for multiple reasons, but one is for some cost and revenue to come into the program. DVR is happy to pay for our schools to provide vocational assistance to students that leads to competitive employment. And I know in Lamar, I've met often with your DVR, one of your DVR counselors, and he's lovely. And I know he's really
Mhm.
excited about this. So,
Right. Yeah.
um, most of our higher education institutes are VR vendors as a school. So the program itself doesn't necessarily need to become its own VR vendor. They can use what's already established at the school between the school and DVR. But if that's not the case, it's key to partner with VR on this. And then while the program's growing, we often have found utilizing existing staff or funding part-time personnel. At one of our community colleges for the first year, the director was a part disability services and part inclusive higher ed to kind of balance out some of the costs as the program was growing. So there's different ways in which to think about how we can use existing staff or part-time or shared resources to not have the cost be so heavy on the inclusive higher ed program at the start.
Mhm. Okay.
So let me stop this and I'm going to go into the budget template real quick. Let's see where, here we go. So I'm using the university budget for this presentation, but it's not that different. There's a whole tab for community college as well. I was prepared with the university today, but this is the budget template. Everything you see in blue is stuff that can be played around with, and it will update the entire rest of the page. So where we start looking at this is how many students do we think we're going to have? This is a hefty lift. This is 36 students by the end for this particular budget. I've seen others just go to 20. I've seen 15. It just kind of depends on the numbers you think that your institution can serve and serve well and wants to serve. And so you'll see if you just go in here and you can update it, it automatically updates the numbers in the column below. So this
Mhm.
is a total playable thing to see how many students do I need to make this work.
Okay.
Um, this next part here is a student to staff ratio. Just kind of watching that. This ends up being a 1-to-6 ratio, but again, they have 36 students. And so, it might be a 1-to-4, it might be a 1-to-3 the whole time. It depends on kind of what that looks like. Our current partner, who's a community college, has 3.5 staff right now. And she hovers around 23 students. And this next part is for those who are living on campus, which doesn't apply to you, but if it did, there's different RAs that are needed in the dorms and that kind of thing. So it's really kind of tracking, this is my need and this is going to drive my budget.
Mhm.
So this next part is really about the income. So like I said, our students pay the normal fees, the normal tuitions. And so these top lines, 17 through 20, is really the income that's coming into the university through tuition and or room and board. And so you really can just put your tuition cost in here. This one happens to be $335 a credit hour. That can be changed in this formula really easily. And typically our students take 2 typical courses totaling 6 credit hours a semester. So it'd be 12 credit hours. So what this does is when you update this um, to whatever amount, let's say it's, I don't know, 250, it'll update that whole line item to what the tuition coming in is. And this number is really what's coming to your college as a whole. This isn't specifically to the inclusive higher ed program. The next part is what we recommend directing to the inclusive higher ed program. So I mentioned we create our own specialized course that is the only time our students really aren't taking typical courses and they are learning some intensive skills around career readiness, independent living, social skills, those kinds of things. But same thing, you pop your tuition course into here and it will update across here how much revenue is coming in based on how many students there are. So it's taking the credit hours and multiplying it by the students and showing you this is the income. The other parts of the income is obviously this grant. So this is where you would plug in kind of the anticipated amount for the grant over the 4 years of program development and 1 year of planning. And then this next line item, I talked about the DVR contribution. So there is a specific line item on the voc rehab fee schedule that will allow for our schools to receive $3,000 a semester per student. The student has to be in a DVR plan and engaged with DVR. So these numbers that you'll see here are based on 75% of the students receiving DVR funding. If you think it's lower, if you think it's higher, that can easily be adjusted. But again, it's just taking the 6,000 times the number of students up above and equating an amount to it. So you have the total income from there. And this line item on 34 is really, that's the income that the program is working with. I'm going to stop there because sometimes I go really fast through these budgets. I made this budget, and so it seems really simple to me, but people looking at it for
No,
the first time, I
it's
might be like crossing your eyes.
no, it's pretty simple. It's straightforward.
Okay, great. So then the next part obviously is the expenses to the program and then kind of what the net is and what the cash reserves look like. So the bulk of the program costs are staffing. And the bulk of this grant will go towards staffing while you're increasing your numbers of students. So we never want the first year programs to feel like they have to have 20 students because I think it's important to settle in and develop and kind of work up to that. So we want to make sure people are funded enough to get staff in place. And then when the grant funding is over, hopefully those staff are ready to roll and we've gotten our numbers up and you're ready to go. This particular template again has 6 staff. That may not be the case at your particular college. We have the salary numbers. This particular template shows a 29% fringe. That may be different at your school. Again, it's as simple as going in and kind of updating what that looks like here. And
Mhm.
kind of when the new staff is coming on. You'll notice later on some of them we started part-time. Maybe that's earlier, maybe some of these start part-time, just kind of depends on what we can make work with the revenue and the expenses.
Right.
The next part is those peer mentors that I talked about. Usually there's about 10 hours a week per student. And this particular template pays them $14 an hour. That may be something that changes at various institutions. But again, it's looking at what's the cost of that going to be. And then if we are going to reimburse through work study, that's that next line item that says, okay, we're going to assume 75% is work study reimbursable.
Mhm.
And then the last one is the resident advisors. Obviously that won't apply to you all, but should it, that's the cost of having an additional RA in the dorms.
Okay.
And then this bottom part are just your other expenses. So this is really flexible and really institution specific. Some of our institutions pay for space, some don't, some have to pay certain indirect cost that can be put in here too. The indirect cost can be no more than 10% per our state regulations of this grant. So at the bottom, you'll see the total expenses and then the net and then the cash reserves. And so there are some in this particular template this year, it's kind of in the negative, but there's enough of a reserve to cover that.
Mhm.
It kind of just shows a 10-year plan. And so when you're playing with the numbers, I think this is the main line item to keep a look at to see, how many students do I need to make this successful and feel financially comfortable.
Right.
So that is that. Any questions on this template?
Nope. No, it's pretty straightforward. We
Good.
we're going to hire also, we have a grant writer on staff, and I've done lots and lots and lots of grants, but this is pretty nice.
Good. I'm glad. We want it to be easy because this is new and it's a big undertaking. And so we want it to be easy and know that although you're going to create a 5-year budget, we understand that things are going to shift. And you may in year 2 or 3 realize, oh, we didn't need that staff, but we need this staff. And so
Right.
we are really open to adjusting the budgets and adjusting the line items and working through it. So
Okay, very cool.
to get things started. So that's it. That's all I had, really.
So
Um,
will you send those documents? I mean, like those templates, or how does that work? I mean,
yeah, so if you here, I'll put it in the chat. It's all on our website right now.
okay, if it's on your website, I can get it from there.
Oh, well, easy enough. I have it open, so I'll just send it to the chat, then you can have it right now. all the documents are on there, the application packet. You'll see something called a budget template. That's that template that I just pulled up.
Okay,
All the details. And then I'll post these slides on the website as well
okay.
to
I
share.
just, I just pulled it up. I'll share that with my team and make sure that they, because I'm not so sure that we've kind of tossed around because we have dorm space and we have,
Oh, you
so
do? I didn't realize that.
yeah, we have a really large resident life population,
Oh,
actually.
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that.
No,
Awesome.
that's okay. And I think um, it would be an additional, you know, benefit to the
Hmm.
students to be in college, in the dorms, in that space with their, counterparts. And I think it would be a really, so we would probably, not probably, I'm pretty confident that we will work to add the residence part in there with
Oh,
the,
that's fantastic. I
yeah,
love that because I think it really gives a rounded experience of I'm going to learn not only my
agreed.
academics and my vocation, but I'm going to learn independent living skills and I'm going to learn how to socialize and be a part of my community and all of
Hmm.
those other skills that students get going to college. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and we're really stepping up our student life, infrastructure and resources. So it would be a really added benefit for the students to be able to experience that.
That's great. Oh, I hope I get the chance to come see Lamar Community College.
Yeah, yeah, Denver. I mean, it's not that far. You're like 3 hours,
Yeah,
3.5 hours from here.
I will admit the first time I talked with the gentleman from DVR, I had to look at where Lamar was.
Yeah.
And I've lived in Colorado my whole life. So
Oh, have you?
yeah, I have, but I don't know. I
I,
wasn't sure.
I moved here in a million years ago, and then but uh, so I left when I got into education. I left and I went to Kansas for many years, and I was in California for many years, and I've only been back in Colorado for a couple of years.
Yeah,
But I lived in this town actually for 20 years before I even started in education. So
that's
it's a,
awesome.
it's a neat to come back and try to help add some of these opportunities to here, which is why I got into ed in the first place. So um, this is an exciting opportunity.
It is, and I'm super excited. So we did the legislation for this and specifically did a needs assessment around our state and realized that our programs are inclusive, but really at the start, when we only had three programs, all in Denver and Colorado Springs, we were only making inclusive for this amount of people, right? They were mostly, urban, white,
Hmm.
middle to upper class. And so I'm really excited about this legislation to expand to different communities that are underserved geographically, but also just with the population. So
Yeah,
it's exciting.
that's very exciting. So I'll get with everybody and share this with them, and we'll try to get the ball rolling.
Awesome. Feel free to reach out with any questions. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to provide guidance. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, sounds great.
The application is due April 15th.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. It was so nice to meet you.
It was nice to meet you too.
Have a
Have a
great
good,
day. Talk to you
you
soon.
too.
Bye.